The Athene Real Talk Podcast explores controversial ideas to stimulate debate and active thinking. These ideas do not always reflect Athene's personal views. Welcome to the Athene Real Talk Podcast.
He has been called the best gamer in the world, hands down.
World-famous gamer and philanthropist Athene.
Gaming for Good, it's called, has raised more than $20 million.
Using his notoriety to raise money for charity.
On activism, science, culture, and self-development.
Proud to have him in the studio today. Would not want to take you on in a video game.
Tim, do you care about your legacy? No, I don't care about my legacy. Do you know why I don't care about my legacy? Because it's an ID. I ain't gonna be around to experience my legacy being remembered. But what I do care about is the impact, the effective impact I have on the future. That's what I care about. But whether it's me or not, I don't care. It's like your cells in your body. Do they care about their legacy? They just do what they have to do for the organism to move forward and to survive, and that's it. That's what I'm doing. I'm just a cell to humanity, what a cell is to me, you know. Lord of Terror says, Athene, can you explain more about that? Why care about your actions rippling after death? Because it's the right thing. You could look at your legacy and remembering you as a positive ripple. I don't really understand what you mean with that. I don't have an emotional attachment to my identity because it doesn't exist. It's fictional anyway. It's a ghost. So when I think about the future, I think about what is my contribution to it. You could almost compare it like if I would be a cell in the body, I would care about the future of the organism. And it's the same with me. My awareness is just wide, it's very wide. I look at the world, I look at everything as a super organism. I don't look at myself as an individual, as an identity, ego and all that crap. I just look at myself as I am what I am and I try to contribute. That's my awareness. Of course, if I'm put in a situation where I have to survive, or where I'm dying or whatever, my primitive part of the brain is gonna hijack myself and I might react and act differently. But when I'm in this state, what I care about is the global impact of my actions. You can compare it with your mom taking care of you. She doesn't care about her legacy, she cares about your future. Same with me. I don't care about my legacy, I care about the future of humanity. Even humanity is not the future of life. Because even humanity won't last that long. Athene, what do you think about your identity being a ghost nothingness? What do you mean with it? What I mean with that is that your identity, your entire idea about the self is just a story. Just like you watch the movie The Matrix and then you go like, oh yeah, this guy, this character has that and that and that. All the stuff that you think is just a story. That's it. Nothing more. Because if you look at what you are yourself, you're an ever-changing unit. Your brain, your neural activity is just an ever-changing unit without center. You're all the time, every single moment, a different entity. And the idea of like, this is who I am, is just a belief that is stored in your brain, and that's it. So that's why I say your identity, it's literally an illusion. Not even philosophical sense, more real concrete. It's just an ID. What you are is different than the labels. You are an ever-changing unit, and you change all the time. And your identity is not in line with what you are. And that's why it's even worse than a ghost. It's flawed. I understand that ideas and concepts of individual people put aside. Physics and life detached from language and ideas is not connected to individual people. But you can look at people remembering you and following things you said as a positive ripple that can help. Like you can look at Steve Jobs' legacy as good if it helps people, innovative tech. Well, that's exactly the thing. When people think about Steve Jobs' legacy, they're not thinking about Steve Jobs' legacy at all. Nobody has a clue about Steve Jobs. It's just an ID. It's a story. When we think about Gandhi or Einstein or Jesus or whatever, it's just stories we read in books. There is absolutely no one that has any clue about those people. We just remember them by the tales being talked about. And that's why I don't care about it. It doesn't mean anything. What is Steve Jobs? Just a name. It's just a combination of letters, that's it, that we give a meaning to. What matters is how we move forward, how we evolve, that is what matters. And then whether it's Steve Jobs or Athene, Athene ain't even my name. A god of wisdom and war? What is even a name? What is even in a name? What does a name even mean? Is that what you want, that people remember a name that your parents gave to you? That's not what matters. What matters is the change, not you, but the change, the positive change. I have never really understood how people could actually care about their legacy like that. I just don't understand that. It just doesn't make any sense. It's a very ego identity kind of thing to do. It just doesn't make any sense. Fork says, Athene, I have to disagree. Friends and family of theirs, close followers and advisors carry their legacy. When you think about legacy, you're doing it wrong. You're looking at it from an identity perspective. And it's because of a flawed paradigm of about the understanding of what you are. When you look at me and you go like, oh, Athene is there. And when you look at Ricardo, say, oh, Ricardo is there, oh, Nolan is there. And you see all these separate entities. That is wrong. That is not in line with what you're actually seeing. What you see is an interpretation of your brain. It's just like a translation of information. And you are the person that is actually putting these labels like, oh, this is Athene, this is the... But your consciousness is the expression of everything at the same time. Everything you see and you interpret is all happening into your consciousness. Your environment is part of what you are. The moment you start thinking like, I am me, my name, this and that, it's infactual. That's not what you are. That's just a story, that's a belief, that's a neural network in your brain that activates, that makes you believe that. But you are also your environment. What you experience is everything. There is nothing outside of it relative to your consciousness. So when you think about legacy, it's just flawed. You're starting to think in third person of people looking at you, and when you die, they carry it on. But like, it just doesn't make any sense to even think like that. Because you already presume that if you would die, or even that you can die, there's so many presumptions you make that don't add up, that make absolutely no sense. You might say like, but why would you then want to move forward and change? And because that's what I am. If it wasn't for my ability to be conscious, if it wasn't for evolution to go the way it was, I wouldn't even be able to think. I'm designed to move forward, therefore that's what I do. It's that simple. Because my sole ability to think structured and to be conscious is a result of billions of years of evolution. It's the logic, it's the foundation, the structure that brings about thoughts, memories, emotions, everything. So doing good and moving forward is not just like what you're designed to do, it is what you are. And when people think about legacy and stuff, it's flawed paradigms all over, misunderstandings of what they are, labeling themselves, going like, oh yeah, you have family, think about you, like this and that. You are only what you are. When you think that people think about you, they're thinking about an image, like an interpretation of what you are. But there is nobody on the planet that doesn't even know what you are except you, and even you don't know it fully. When your mom thinks about you, she thinks about the concept of you. She has an ID. She has almost like a, what do you call it? A hologram version of you in her head. But that's not you. It's an approximation. So when you think about legacy, when you start thinking about labels, it just doesn't add up because nobody is even remembering Einstein for who he was. Even for his work. What work? How many people do even know his work? I mean, it's just ghosts. It doesn't matter. But it's because people have such a wrong vision and think in identity and ego and stories. People are so invested in their own story, it makes no sense. They drag it over everywhere. But when you realize what you really are, you can let it go. And then you don't care anymore about your past or whatever. You just learn from your past. You use that information to try and optimize the present going to the future. And then you'll be much more productive and effective because that's more in line with what you are, rather than an ID or an identity or whatever. So all this legacy, it just doesn't make sense. It just does not make sense. Azermo says, Athene, you say happiness is doing something in life with a strong goal, but can't you be happy if you just do something you really like playing music or laying on the beach or in the garden on a sunny day? I've never said that happiness is doing something in life with a strong goal. I've said, if you want to know what happiness is, neurologically, it's when there's no dissonance in your brain. If your brain does not experience cognitive dissonance, you're automatic in the now, in the moment, and you feel happy. Unless you have a chemical imbalance and you're clinically depressed or something. So most people feel automatically happy when they don't experience cognitive dissonance. Now, you can ask like, how do I avoid experiencing cognitive dissonance, right? That depends on your awareness. That depends on the information. Cognitive dissonance arises when you have two different neural networks that contradict each other. So depending on your beliefs, if you have a belief, you can perfectly live a lie as long as you're not confronted with the opposite. The moment you get confronted, you will experience dissonance and you will have to deal with that. So yes, you can be happy by just playing guitar, but the moment you realize that playing guitar is useless and you could spend your time saving kids, for example, then it's not going to make you happy anymore. So it depends on your awareness. That's why you have also the expression, ignorance is bliss. Because ignorance allows you to have less cognitive dissonance, but at the same time it allows you to be less flexible. That's why awareness is more long-term compatible, even though you might give examples where certain people are more happy being ignorant. Murky Krut says, Athene, why would you attempt to become more open-minded if you are happy with whatever makes you ignorant and is sustainable? You shouldn't. If that is the case, then you shouldn't. If you can live a perfectly happy life with being ignorant, I'm not going to come tell you you shouldn't do it. And that is exactly the reason why I don't talk to people. If they can be happy in their ignorance, maybe that's even better than me confronting them and getting them out of their bubble. I'm very practical and effective oriented. And sometimes it's better to be ignorant. But when you get in a situation where you get confronted, you will be a lot less flexible. That's why I focus on the younger generation, because you guys are not as ignorant yet. You don't have adopted and absorbed as much bullshit. But once you got to a certain age and you're invested in all that bullshit, forget about it. It's not gonna do so much anymore. Jesus and Athene, what is the world doing wrong and how can we improve to save the people who are in need? It's not about what the world is doing wrong. It's about what you are doing wrong. Because you don't have any impact on what the world is doing. You have impact on what you are doing. What I mean with that is you have control over what you are doing, not what the world is doing. So the question that every single person that is wondering, the world is a fucked up place, what can we do? That's even the wrong question. It's not about what we can do, it's what you can do. And when you ask that question, that's the first step to make a difference in the world. And that's the only step for you to make a difference in the world. When you start thinking like that, you'll be much more proactive. Silver Soul says, I think, can you talk about social neuroscience because I had a hard time understanding it in God in the Neurons. Okay, so basically when I was reading about it, which was like 6 years ago, it was in its infancy and it's mirror neurons. And basically mirror neurons are neurons that fire when you perform the action or when someone else performs the action. And there's theories that that's the way you learn. By seeing someone else do it, those neurons fire, so when you do it, the same ones are the ones that fire as well. In the documentary, what it says is like, depending on how strong your own neural pathways are, how much you think about life or whatever, you will be more or less you in an environment. So let's say those neural pathways are very underdeveloped because you haven't really either reflected or grown to learn yourself or whatever. Then when you're in an environment, you is mainly going to be the mirror neurons firing because of your environment. And therefore you literally lose yourself. And that's what a lot of people experience when they're in social environments, when they lose themselves. And the reason why they lose themselves is because their own neural pathways are not very well developed. And the way to do that is by having neural activity flow through it. And that requires you to be aware about your ideas and think about those things, and that's how you grow confidence. I guess that's what you're talking about when it's about gods in the neurons, the connection between your own neural pathways and the ones that get triggered when you're in an environment, and that defines the extent to which you care about what other people think about you and such. But as you grow, your own neural pathways gets more stimulated and you start becoming more confident. ZZ Reigns says, Athene, please answer. Big question. I'm struggling in my way to enlightenment. Is the more effective way to enlightenment by practicing meditation, meaning just focusing the moment and not thinking nothing, or instead teaching your brain into the enlightenment state by watching your God in the Neurons documentary and gaining knowledge from other sources and teaching in consciousness state to yourself instead? First of all, you have to get rid of the label of enlightenment. Get rid of it. Don't be emotionally attached to enlightenment. Because sometimes people can easily lose themselves in concepts they created. Like, oh, I want to be wise, or I want to be enlightened, or I want to be this or that. Just try to grow. Very simple. Just try to be the best version of yourself and define that best version by science. So the best thing to do so is knowledge. But even more important than knowledge is your ability to obtain that knowledge and to grow and be able to use that knowledge. Because you can have all the knowledge is right there already. You can just Google it, but yet nobody uses it. So it's not just knowledge, it's the way you deal with it. And the best way that you deal with knowledge is by putting your brain in the best state possible. And that's by eating healthy, by taking the right supplements, sleeping enough, putting yourself in the right environment with not too much noise. And you can also have meditation. You will reach a level where the word enlightenment won't even matter so much to you anymore. There's another thing I wanted to say, actually, and that was something that Nolan brought about yesterday. I also explained it yesterday. I was running today with him, and I said, like, the way you came across, there is something you really have to learn when you talk to audiences. And it's not just to audiences, even sometimes to people. It's not about what you say, it's about how you say it. Most people, the cues they get in a conversation has nothing to do with the information. People have most people, not all people, but most people have a very little awareness and ability to process information. Most cues are body language, are the way you come across, confidence, whatever. You can basically lie to an entire crowd and have them cheer for you if you just are confident and know how to play into the crowd. You can say the biggest nonsense. And if you realize that it's not about what you say, but how you say it, then a lot of dynamics start changing. And that is one of the reasons when, like, I just heard someone say, like, yeah, it's good that you say that everything you say is not absolute truth because some people have to hear it. I say that several times. I've said it multiple times. But the problem is the how of how I say things affects people watching the stream more than what I say. Because I'm very confident. And I say things very confidently. But I don't know jack shit. I don't know jack shit. We don't know jack shit. We're only scratching the surface of our intelligence. And our growth has still miles to go. And our insight and our knowledge right now is very minimal. And I have no issues saying that. Although yet, because of my confidence, I can easily trigger other people that are, have ego or whatever and start thinking like, hey, who do you think you are to say that shit or this or that? I'm not stating absolute truths. I'm just trying to think for myself, be open-minded and move forward. And that is the duality between what you say and how you say it. And if you can master these, you can really achieve a lot in your life. I would really say that 90% of what I achieve in my life, 90% is how I say things and not what I say. If not more than 90%, if not 95%, is how I say stuff. Like almost everything I've achieved in my life, the Save the Children, everything is how I say stuff, not what I say. And that's a very important insight for you guys to have, because sometimes you can break your head 1,000 times on your pickup line, what to say. But it's not what pickup line you use to get a chick, it's how you say it, your confidence, the way you come across. And that is something that people have to realize. It's about chicks, about career, about your parents, about whatever you want to achieve in life. It's how, not what. I wish it was more what and less how, because then the world would be a better place. But people are more impulsive. So depending on what kind of people you talk with, people that are more rational, they care more about what you say. People that are more emotional care about how you say it. And that's why I can be sometimes autistic in the way I communicate, because I only care about what I say. I've had to learn how to say things throughout the years. I've learned how to say things and adapt. But back in the days when I was younger, I had a really hard time how to say things. I was very just information driven. It's almost like, yeah, here's the information. It doesn't matter whether I yell at you or just say it nice or whatever. But I learned throughout years that people have a more emotional framework. And you have different people with different brains. You have people that are more autistic or people that are more emotional. It's a very important insight. It will help you guys a lot. Well, I'm saying autistic. I wouldn't call myself autistic, but I'm just saying autistic because it's the shortest word I can use to explain, more rational and not so much like I didn't really ping other people's feelings. It's more about how you say it. So, I had to learn that the hard way. If I knew that how to say stuff was much more important, Ian and Dean wouldn't have left. Even though they didn't leave because of how I say stuff, it's because there was a big distance, but I would have known how to calibrate myself and keep contact closer, because most people are just emotional beings. So
Subscribe to youtube.com/AtheneWins. Watch the live stream at twitch.tv/AtheneLive and follow The Real Athene on Snapchat.